So for anybody to think the Father created somebody that was imperfect and not to do His will is absolutely incorrect. Not only do they do His will, He actually called them His angels also. So, and when you go back to Revelation 7, right? And I want to hit what Brother Demetrius said, because I was going to hit the same thing, Brother Demetrius, but I'm going to get in detail with it. You said, therefore, therefore are they before the throne of God and serve Him day and night in His temple. That was the Gentiles, and He that sitteth on the throne shall dwell among them. They shall hunger no more, neither thirst any more, neither shall the sun light on them, nor any heat. For the Lamb which is in the midst of the throne shall feed them, and shall lead them into fountains of living water. And God shall wipe away all tears from their eyes. So let's go find out what this is talking about. Because for some reason, when we get a hold of the vision, we want to say this haven't happened yet because we still hunger, and we still thirst, and we're still sun, and the Lamb ain't feeding us yet, and we haven't got the living waters yet. So we're gonna see what's actually going on here. We're gonna go back to Genesis, where this all went down in the first place. Because if we believe all this has been fulfilled, that means we're in the new creation, right?
Yes, sir.
So we're going to find out what happened in the old creation. Where did it all go wrong at? So we're going to go to Genesis 3. And we're going to start after the fall. We're going to see what happened, what they call the fall of man. We're going to see what was given to them after they was given the, what's the word I want to look for? The punishment or the judgment of having to leave the Garden of Eden. So now, this is what happened right here. Can you start at Genesis 3 and start at verse number 16?
Okay. Unto the woman he said, I will greatly multiply thy sorrow and thy conception. In sorrow thou shalt bring forth children, and thy desire shall be to thy husband, and he shall rule over thee.
Hold on, stop right there. Can we equate that with tears?
Yep, sorrow.
Okay, yep. So he said there's going to be no tears? Okay, keep reading, my brother.
And unto Adam he said, because thou hast hearkened unto the voice of thy wife, and hast eaten of the tree of which I commanded thee, saying, Thou shalt not eat it, cursed is the ground for thy sake. In sorrow shalt thou eat it all the days of thy life.
Can we say, keep going.
Thorns also and thistles shall it bring forth to thee, and thou shalt eat the herb of the field. In the sweat of thy face shalt thou eat bread, till thou return to the ground. For out of it thou wast taken, for dust thou art, and unto dust thou shalt return.
So can we say that he's hitting on hunger? And he said sweat is going to be in their face, right? Is that not a little of that sunlight on them?
Okay.
Is that not a little of that heat on them?
That heat.
So now, in verse 17 it says, For the Lamb which is in the midst of the throne shall feed them, and shall lead them into living fountains of water. So can we not see? Okay, so by default, now let me tell me if I'm right, Brother Mike. By default, if it was a curse, or if it was the bad judgment, was for them to have sorrow, and for them to work with the sweat of the field, and for them the sun state before?
Yep. That's what that means.
So when they was in the Garden of Eden, they didn't have to worry about hunger, sorrow.
It went out.
I said when they was in the Garden of Eden, they didn't have to worry about hunger, thirst, or heat, or none of that stuff, right?
Yep.
When they was in the Garden of Eden, they didn't have to worry about death, right?
Right.
Okay, so when we get to Revelation 22, can you read verse number 1 and 2?
Yep. And he showed me a pure river of water, of life, clear as crystal, proceeding out of the throne of God and the Lamb. In the midst of the street of it, and on either side of the river, was there the tree of life, which bare 12 manners of fruit, and yielded her fruit every month. And the leaves of the tree were for the healing of the nations. Wow.
So now they're back in the Garden of Eden, right?
They're healed.
So if they're in the Garden of Eden, they're not going through no more hunger, thirst, death, or any of that other stuff, right?
Correct.
So he's not talking about them actually not being, he's not actually talking about them per se dealing with hunger and thirst. And if a person ever be hungry, they can't be in the garden. Or if a person ever be thirsty, they can't be in the garden. Or if a person dies and have a funeral per se, they can't be in the garden. It doesn't seem like that's what he's talking about. It seems like he's talking about a place or a relationship with the Most High.
Yes, sir.
Can I ask a question?
Oh, my bad. I had supposed to. Oh, yeah, go ahead. My bad.
I'm a little confused as to what you're saying and what you're getting at. So if you don't mind, explaining it again.
Okay, so you missed a big portion of the lesson, so I'm gonna let my brother Elvin summarize it for you, get you up to speed. Go ahead, Elvin.
Well, I probably will make it even more confusing real fast. So hold on. Moses, you there? Josephus. All right. Well, I'm gonna try to make it. I'm gonna try. Okay, we're taking that the Feast of Tabernacles was just a shadow of what it literally meant, and it really just meant the nations gathering together under the gospel and allowing Christ, or coming and letting Christ be their king, just like the Israelites was. And showing also the things in the book of Revelation dealing with the Feast of Tabernacles was not literal. Neither was the thing about the hunger, the thirst, the dying, and etc. It was representing a state of being and not so forth literal as people take it.
So wait, you said the Feast of Tabernacles is to bring the nations together?
Should I read Colossians 2 for her, Elvin?
Yeah. Go ahead, my brother. And yes, ma'am. The answer was yes to your question also.
All right. So in Colossians 2, I believe it was 16, right? No.
I think it was around 23.
20.
Wasn't it?
Yeah, 20.
23.
Okay.
Yes.
Oh, my bad. I was in the wrong chapter. That's what it was. Okay. You sure it was 23? It's Colossians 2. I know it's Colossians 2. I think it was.
Oh, no, my bad. Hold on. I'm still driving, so
All right.
my memory. I thought it was Colossians.
Or maybe I'm bugging.
Just, give us 1 second, sis.
Oh, no, I'm gonna let you down. 2:17. There you go.
2:17.
Yeah, okay.
2:17. Yeah.
So I'm gonna start at 16. Therefore, do not let anyone judge you by what you eat or drink, or with regard to a religious festival, a new moon, celebration, or a Sabbath day. These are a shadow of things that were to come. The reality, however, is found in the body of Christ. So it's saying that the feasts are a shadow of and the fulfillment is in the body of Christ.
Right. So the feasts actually are just pointing to Christ and his life and what he accomplished through the gospel. That's all the feast was about. He gave it to Israel as a proxy, and Israel was supposed to take it to the nations. But they really couldn't do that because Israel couldn't get Israel together. So the Christ came when he had to at the fullness of times, and he actually got it all together. But we didn't actually did that whole breakdown in Zechariah 14 and Revelation 7 and etc. before. I think he jumped on. But if you would like us to hit on the key points, I can, like in 5 minutes. If you like, I'll try to do it in 5 minutes or less.
Sure.
All right. Brother Mike, we're going to try to do it like in 5 minutes.
All right.
We're going to go to
Zechariah 14. All right.
Zechariah 14 and verse
16.
Where did we start at?
Is it 16 or 17?
Yeah, it started at 16.
And it shall come to pass that everyone that is left of all the nations which came against Jerusalem shall even go up from year to year to worship the King and the Lord of hosts, and to keep the Feast of Tabernacles. And it shall be that whoso will not come up of all the families of the earth unto Jerusalem to worship the King, the Lord of hosts, even upon them shall be no rain.
You can read 18 and 19.
And if the family of Egypt go not up and come not, that have no rain, there shall be the plague, wherewith the Lord will smite the heathen that come not up to keep the Feast of Tabernacles. This shall be the punishment of Egypt, and the punishment of all nations that come not up to keep the Feast of Tabernacles. You want me to continue?
All right, so now we're gonna correlate that with Revelation 7 because we have all of the nations going into the holy mountain celebrating the Feast of Tabernacles. So once you correlate that with Revelation 7,
and 7 start with 1, right?
you can go down there to he asks, "Who are these in the white robes?"
Oh, okay. Okay.
Revelation 7 and verse number 9.
9, okay. After this I beheld, and lo, a great multitude, which no man could number, of all nations and kindreds and people and tongues stood before the throne and before the Lamb, clothed with white robes and palms in their hands, and cried with a loud voice, saying, Salvation to our God, which sitteth upon the throne, and unto the Lamb.
All right, so you got it right there. That's those same nations that had to come in and worship the Feast of Tabernacles. These same Gentile nations, are sitting there before the throne, and they're calling God their God. So that multitude of nations right there, that's tabernacling with the Father and the Son, right there in Revelation 7. It's the same nations that's required to go up and keep the Feast of Tabernacles in Zechariah 14. So these was all Gentile nations. That's it, like in 5 minutes or less.
Did you get a better understanding?
No, I got it, but I'm not really quite sure about that Revelations one, only because if you read further down in Revelation 7, right, verse 14, do you guys mind if I read it?
You want to read it, or you want me to read it for you?
I can read it.
Okay, go ahead.
Verse 13, actually. And one of the elders answered, saying unto me, What are these which are arrayed in white robes? And whence came they? Verse 14. And I said unto him, Sir, thou knowest. And he said to me, These are they which came out of great tribulation, and have washed their robes, and made them in white the blood of the Lamb. Therefore are they before the throne of God, and serve him day and night in the temple. And he sitteth on the throne, shall dwell among them. Right? And so as I read that, right, I look at, for me personally, I look at a particular people, and then I have to ask myself, who came out of great tribulation? Right? And then even when, because you're talking about the Feast of Tabernacles, right? The Feast of Tabernacles is first spoken about in Leviticus, right? When he told Moses to tell them to keep that, and why? Why was it significant? Because they had came out of Egypt. But I do agree that the verse that you read in Zechariah, right? I read it from the KJV as well as you guys were reading it, right? And towards the end of that verse, I realized was something that stood out to me is that, other nations will be there, right? And that is also, they're supposed to keep that day too as a reminder, right? But I think it's 14, and can I start at 18? It says, and if the family of Egypt go not up, and come not, they have no rain, there shall be the plague, wherewith the Lord will smite the heathen that come not up to keep the Feast of Tabernacles. This shall be the punishment of Egypt, and the punishment of all nations that come not up to keep the Feast of Tabernacles. So Israel is supposed to teach the other nations the law, statutes, and commandments, and the high holy days, right? But like you said, this is a foreshadow of Christ to come, and what it's going to look like after Hebrews 8 is, and we're in that new covenant, has been accomplished. Like, you know what I mean? So that's just my opinion.
I got a few questions for you first. If we have Zechariah 14, it's a time of the end prophecy. It's one of those end days prophecy. And Revelation is an end day prophecy. Where in the book of Revelation does the heathens actually go and keep the Feast of Tabernacles in the book of Revelation?
The Revelations are things to come, right? And so if we look at Revelation, right? And even when you went to when you went to chapter 7 is only speaking to me, is only about Israel. But I do know in the kingdom, right, there's a hierarchy. And in the kingdom, other nations will be there, and they will serve Israel, right? In the kingdom, when the laws are written on our hearts, and we have all those, we're in the covenant, and we're in that new covenant, right? They will serve, And in serving, they will also have to follow the law, statutes, and commandments, as well as the high holy days.
Okay, well, what I'm asking is, let me be specifically what I'm asking. If there's an end day prophecy, because in Revelation 7 actually says that these nations have got the palms in their hands, which in Leviticus 23, that's a sign of the Feast of Tabernacles. So these nations got palms in their hand, and they're tabernacling with the Most High. Okay, so if that's not Zechariah 14, where the other nations are going up and doing the Feast of Tabernacles, where in the book of Revelation is it where the other nations are doing the Feast of Tabernacles, or are you saying it's not there?
No, I don't see it.
Okay, so now this will be a problem, because now we will have John the Revelator saying something that another prophet did said. So now John the Revelator will skip something that another prophet had already stated. Now we will have kind of inaccuracy in prophecies, because John can't say nothing different than what Zechariah said. Zechariah can't say nothing different than what Isaiah said. They all got to say the same things. They might say it different ways, but the same point has to be there. So now, to do that, we're going to say that, that's exactly how Zechariah ended his prophecy, with the nations coming up serving the Feast of Tabernacles. And we have the Feast of Tabernacles presented in the book of Revelation several times. But now, those nations in which Zechariah had already prophesied, now it doesn't exist in the book of Revelation. Now we're having, that's not how the ancient Israelites worked. So we will have to find it, or there will be no proof that Zechariah was inspired. Remember the Torah says everything got to be on 2 or 3 witnesses. So we need to find some more witnesses for what Zechariah is talking about.
I get what you're saying, and I'm not disregarding what Zechariah said, right? But if you look at the timeline between the time Zechariah was written and Revelation was written, Revelation is the end of the Bible, right? And so the thing is, Zechariah is absolutely right in what he prophesied. And what I'm saying is, I'm not disagreeing that other nations won't be there, right? But what I'm saying rather is other nations, when they are honoring the high holy days, right? They're gonna learn from Israel, right? They're gonna serve Israel, so they're gonna have to do what the laws. They're gonna have to do what we say do, right? And so if that means honoring the holy days, then that's what they'll have to do. So yeah, all nations will.
Can you show me that scripture that you're talking about?
Which part?
That they're gonna be under Israel. They have to learn the high holy days and all that other stuff. Can you show me that scripture?
Yeah, give me 1 second. Hold on.
Okay. Alright. And then I can show you, I'm gonna show you in Isaiah, where this prophecy is again in Isaiah. Then I can piggyback that with the same revelation. So give me 1 second.
Well, while you guys are doing that, I just want to remind everyone that if you want to see the full lesson after I'm done recording, it's going to be on the RPK channel on YouTube. So you just type in RPK, Resurrection, Prophecy, and Kingdom, pull up the channel, and you will see the recordings on there.
Okay, you ready?
Yep.
So first you can go to Isaiah 14 and 2. Do you guys want to read it?
I can read it.
Go ahead.
You said 14 and 2?
Go ahead, yeah.
And the people shall take them and bring them to their place, and the house of Israel shall possess them in a land of the Lord for servants and handmaids, and they shall take them captives, whose captives they were, and they shall rule over their oppressors.
So that is a prophecy speaking that from Isaiah, right? So when he's speaking about, we got to know who's what they're speaking about. So Israel was captives in the land of their captors, right? And so Israel will, in the days to come, they will take those same captors and they will serve them, right? And the second one I have, give me a second, I got to pull it. I'm using my phone, y'all, so give me a second.
All right, you want me to wait on you? You want me to tell you what Isaiah 14 was talking about?
You can go ahead.
All right, and trust me, I understand the doctrine. I was with a camp for like a couple of years. So okay, so once you go to Isaiah 13, which is what Isaiah 14 is piggybacking off of, I'm just gonna read it real fast. I've been finally got into my house. All right, Isaiah 13. This is what it states. Isaiah 13, I'm going to start at verse number 1. The burden of Babylon, which Isaiah the son of Amos did see. And then I want to go down to verse number 17. Behold, I will stir up the Medes against them, which shall not regard silver, and as for gold, they do not delight in it. I'm going to go down to verse 19 and 20. And Babylon, the glory of the kingdoms, the beauty of the Chaldees, excellence shall be with God. When God overthrew Sodom and Gomorrah, it shall never be inhabited. Neither shall it be dwelt in from generation to generation. Neither shall the Arabian pitch tent there. Neither shall the serpents make their fold there. So I'm going to read Isaiah 14 now. I'm going to read 1 through 4. For the Lord will have mercy on Jacob, and will yet choose Israel, and set them in their own land. And the strangers shall be joined with them, and they shall cleave to the house of Jacob. And the people shall take them and bring them in their place, and the house of Israel shall possess them in the land of the Lord for servants and handmaids. And they shall take them captives, who captives they were, and they shall rule over their oppressors. And it shall come to pass in that day that the Lord shall give rest from thy sorrow, and from thy fear, and from thy hard bondage wherein thou was made to serve. Thou shalt take up this proverb against the king of Babylon and say, how hath the oppressor ceased, the golden city ceased? So Isaiah 13 and 14 is a prophecy against the king of Babylon, and it was fulfilled in the book of Daniel when the Medes came in and destroyed Babylon. And under Cyrus, he actually let Israel go back into their land, and they took servants and handmaids from the Babylonians and back into the land of Israel. So that was fulfilled.
Yeah. But we're not in the land that we're. See. Right. Okay, this
has nothing to do with us. See, people teach this as a future prophecy, and this was fulfilled under the Babylonian being destroyed by Cyrus and all of them. So this happened thousands of years ago. People just teach it as future.
That baffles me then, because in the book of Daniel, it also, the book of Daniel, when he speaks in regard to his dreams and the four beasts, right? What are the four beasts representing?
One of those beasts is the Medes, I believe.
Right. Yeah. And so one of the beasts is the Medes. One of them is it's all of Israel's captivity in the whole, as a whole, right? And if you read, I'm trying to actually find the rest. I'm using my phone, right? It says, behold, the throne was cast down, and the Ancient of Days did say whose garment was. Okay, so I think it's 9, right?
He did it during the fourth beast, though.
What?
That's during the fourth beast.
What's doing the fourth beast?
What you're reading about the thrones being cast down, etc., that happens during the fourth beast. Babylon was the first beast.
This is the... Babylon was the fourth beast?
No, the Babylon was the first beast. You're reading what happened under the fourth beast when the thrones was cast down.
This is referring to all 4 beasts.
No. You want me to read it for you?
I can read it, but I'm just saying as I read it, right, because they're referencing all 4 beasts, right? And this is a dream that he prophesied, right? This is a dream. And then if you read, I think it's chapter 12, Daniel, then he speaks to the angel. Let me make sure. He speaks to, I can't think of the angel name right now.
It was about Michael.
Yeah, and the angel Michael came to him, and then he also prophesied in the days to come, right? And if we're running and the because we're still under the Roman captivity, right? The only difference is the names changed.
I trust me, I understand the doctrine, but what I want to ask you to do, what I would literally ask you to do, sis, I would say, first of all, let's let the scriptures speak for what they say. Okay? So Isaiah, when you went to Isaiah 14, it literally says the Babylon. It literally says that. So anything dealing with Babylon, that's where we have to look for the fulfillment of Isaiah. We can't go to anything outside of Babylon because Isaiah actually tells us against Babylon. So we have to stick with Babylon.
But then even that would be off, right? Because as we look at it, right, you said we have to stick only to Babylon. That's in the Old Testament, but isn't Babylon also referenced in the New Testament? And what is that Babylon?
No, Mystery Babylon is referenced in the New Testament. Isaiah 14 wasn't talking about Mystery Babylon. It was talking about the literal Babylon where they went into captivity.